got the wrong window. Let's close that. There we go. Hi everybody. How's it going? Pangoria Fallstar here. How you doing, gamers? So I decided that I figured I could do a stream where I read some of my fanfiction. And let me remove this window so it fits better. And let me blow this up. Hold on, just moving things so that you guys can read along better. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So, I decided, this was a while back, a couple of years ago, that to write a Ranma 1/2 Big Mouth fusion, alternate universe. And I combined a few other characters from different animes that were of the ecchi variety, the H variety, if you will. And this is it. So, do we have anybody in the chat? If you're watching, please feel free to say hello. Let's see. Oh, okay, so this should not. Okay, good. No, it's not carrying over. It's because I had the wrong window as the main. But it did that earlier. So let me reset myself up with my mod view. Give me a moment. And but yeah, if you're here, go ahead, say hello. According to more popular streamers, I should spend about an hour saying hello and an hour saying goodbye. But I think that's based on number of viewers. But anyways, let's go. We have, alright, so this all set up now so I can keep an eye on things. Perfect. Alright, so like I said, this is Ranma's Big Mouth. Episode 1, Ejaculation. Something was seriously wrong with Ranma. He had been followed all day by a strange man, but Ranma could not sense any key from the guy. The guy wore outdated clothes and even had a baseball cap he wore backwards. But no matter what Ranma did, the guy managed to keep up with him. Ranma tried pointing the guy out to Akane and Ukyo while they were in class, but they couldn't see him. But what was really bothering Ranma was that as much as he noticed the guy, he kept noticing Ukyo and Akane that day. Gym was especially difficult for Ranma that day. Just legs and butts, and he was a pervert. Akane had been right this whole time. Ranma finally realized he was a pervert. After getting home, Ranma decided to work out. He spent 2 hours going all out in his katas, and by the end of it, he nearly collapsed. Nabiki stood at the door, camera in hand. "Nice job, Saotome," Nabiki said, leering at him as he took off his shirt and laid back on the floor of the dojo. Nabiki walked over and stood above Ranma. She was wearing her incredible short jeans shorts today, and a pretty halter top that was slightly loose. Looking up at her, Ranma's eyes traced up her legs to where they met at her crotch, and just beyond he could see her belly as the shirt exposed her at this angle. Ranma swallowed hard. Nabiki eyed Ranma's reaction and chuckled. She took a quick picture of him and said, "Well now, it looks like both of us will have something to think about later." Ranma nodded dumbly as Nabiki walked away. With greater effort than he thought he would need, Ranma headed to the bathroom. As he was about to open the door, Akane came out. They stared at each other briefly previous encounters flashing through both their minds at the same time. Akane was dressed, but obviously had recently showered. Ranma, on the other hand, was still topless. Akane looked away. Ranma suddenly felt incredibly self-conscious. He covered himself, holding his shirt in front of him. He apologized and stepped out of the way, and Akane just nodded and walked off. Ranma was about to walk in when Kasumi came out of the bathroom as well. With a smile, she simply let him know that the bathroom was now available, and Ranma just nodded. Once inside, Ranma flipped the shower room door to say occupied and stripped off the rest of his clothes. Ranma stared at the shower seat. Suddenly, from behind him, Ranma heard a masculine voice he had never heard before say, "You think if you smell it, you can smell Akane's butt on that stool?" A shiver traveled up Ranma's spine and he froze. There was no key behind him. No one was there. But as Ranma turned around, he saw the man that had been haunting him all day. The man with the old-fashioned 90s clothes, with the backwards baseball cap, with the fanny pack? Seriously? Ranma felt defensive, but he couldn't read anything off this guy. Preparing himself to attack, Ranma asked, "Who are you? How did you get in here? Why have you been following me?" The man laughed. "Oh, Ranma, I'm sorry I showed up so late. I'm Kintaro, your hormone kami." Ranma stared at the guy and asked, "What?" "I am the sensation you get when you look at Nabiki's belly. I'm what makes you want to fight Kuno for touching Akane. I'm what shows up when your penis becomes erect." Ranma shook his head. "What are you talking about?" Kintaro pointed down to Ranma's crotch. Ranma's eyes followed the pointing finger until he saw his manhood. It was doing something he had never seen it do before. It was bigger than usual, and it was floating. Ranma reached down and poked it down, and it bounced back up. Ranma asked, "What is this?" Kintaro stepped closer and said, "It is pleasure and happiness like you have never known. Now grab your destiny, Ranma, if you know what I mean." Alright, that was the first scene. Hopefully everybody's having fun hanging out here. Alright. I sent out a message out to everybody on different platforms, but I'd been busy doing things, so let's move on to the next scene. Akane got dressed. She still couldn't believe what she saw in the bathroom. Shivering, she quickly headed downstairs. She was almost out the door, hoping not to run into that person again. As she was closing the front door, she heard Nabiki behind her. "Hey, Akane." Akane froze up. She wanted to just close the door, but Nabiki had caught her. Her hands were suddenly slippery, and she couldn't even turn the handle of the door. Akane swallowed deeply. She forced a smile on her face and said, Sorry, Nabiki. I have to get going. Let everyone know I won't make it for dinner, okay?" Nabiki was going to ask where Akane was off to, but her little sister closed the door and ran off before Nabiki could even digest what she said. Interesting, Nabiki thought with a smile. She wondered what was going on, but whatever it was, when she found out, she would be making a lot of money. Akane rushed off, away from the house, away from that person. She could still see everything so clearly, and she just wasn't sure what to do about it. Her aimless gait was halted when she approached Ukchan's. Rival or not, Akane needed to talk to someone. Akane was greeted by Kanatsu at the door. She sat down at the grill bar and ordered a simple okonomiyaki to hide her intent. Though with the way Ukyo kept looking at her, she thought that maybe she had failed that. By the time the store closed and not a conversation had been had, Akane realized that Ukyo knew that something had happened to her. Still, the okonomiyaki chef said nothing as she began to clean up. Konatsu locked the front door. Akane looked around and realized they were finally alone. Suddenly, she couldn't hold back anymore. Akane screamed as quietly as she could. "Ukyo!" Ukyo looked at Akane. With a sigh, she walked around the bar and sat beside her rival for Ranma. She took a breath, preparing to hear something about Ranma, preparing to be angry at someone. She looked at Akane's obviously stressed face and asked, "What is it, sugar?" Akane took a big gulp of air, and disjointedly, in between hiccups, she said, I saw so much hair down there." Ukyo's brow furrowed. This might be an issue. A game changer. It seems maybe Akane made more progress with Ranma than anticipated. This could mean a lot of changes were coming up. Ukyo put a hand on Akane's shoulder and said, "Calm down, Akane. You saw hair down where?" Akane took a big breath and let it out in one shuddering go. Her eyes closed as she gathered up all her willpower. Finally, she opened her eyes and she said, "I wanted to take a bath today, but Kasumi was in there. She said it was okay for us to share. I mean, we are sisters and all. But I haven't shared a bath with her in so long. Well, anyways, when she got up to leave the furrow, she had all this hair down between her legs." Ukyo almost wanted to laugh. "Oh, come on, Akane. Obviously she has hair. It's really common for anyone who has gone through puberty." Akane stared at Ukyo as if she had grown an extra head. Ukyo looked back at Akane, her incredulous smile slowly fading. As time passed without a response from Akane, Ukyo began to get worried. Finally, Ukyo asked, "Akane, have you ever had a period?" Akane shook her head no. Now she was starting to worry if something was wrong with her. Akane looked away from Ukyo and said, "I had heard about it, but I've never had one." Ukyo nodded. "Well, let me finish cleaning up. I think we need to talk about this." Alright, so there's the second scene. Hey! Okay, I'm checking out the chat. Christian's here. Lame Vision, sorry. Lame Vision! Best artist I have on Twitter. Follow him on Twitter. Lame. Post your Twitter in the chat, man. Go for it. Post your Twitter link. Good, and you're a Ranma fan, right? I remember we were talking about the opening scene. This is awesome. Alright. Okay. But yeah, post your, feel free to post your, because I think it saves the chat logs. You can post your Twitter link in the chat if anybody else shows up. Feel free. All right. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate the support. There we are. I haven't really set up much, so I don't know when people follow me yet, so sorry about that. Alright, yeah. I'll go back to reading. Thank you. Alright, next scene. Ranma lay on his bedroll, unable to sleep. His father was in panda form, snoring next to him. Ranma just couldn't understand what had happened today. All he knew is that it scared him. Now as he thought back, images of Shampoo floated up from his memories. All the times she showed up in his bath. Even Akane appeared in his mind's eye. "Hey there, Rumi," Kintaro said, suddenly kneeling right next to Ranma. Ranma shook his head. "No, you can't be here. I'm not doing that again. My dad is right there. I'm not that kind of person. Kintaro laughed. Yes, you are. Otherwise, why would I be here? Ranma's eyes opened wide as he realized the truth. I am that kind of person, aren't I? Yes. Now grab your dick and start stroking it. Ranma closed his eyes as he felt his hot member under the sheet. He began to jerk off as quietly as he could. He looked away from Kintaro and muttered, Can't believe I'm doing this. Kintaro leaned into Ranma's ear and whispered, Hey, remember what Nabiki was wearing today? Ranma nodded. Kintaro smiled. She gave you quite the view of her belly, didn't she? Yeah. Ranma's answer came out quietly. Remember what she said? She said both of us would have something to think about tonight. Kintaro smiled widely. You think she's doing the same thing right now? Oh my god. Ranma thought Nabiki might be touching herself right now. Her hands on her legs, her shorts pulled down, her fingers touching herself. Suddenly, everything ended. Ranma, spent, collapsed back on the bedroll. Good night, Ranma, Kintaro said as he began to go into Ranma's closet. Wait, what do I do with this mess? Kintaro laughs. You sleep in it like the filthy pervert you are. Alright, that's another scene down. Let's go. Why is this? My users and chat thing isn't updating, which is annoying. Ah, there it is now. Nice. Okay. Have to hide it. Alright, anybody new? No. Alright. Thanks for listening in. We're going to another scene here. The rest of the week found Ranma experiencing a very real and very private hobby. Every moment at the Tendo house resulted in random stimuli that would result in Ranma looking to get away from Akane, Nabiki, and even Kasumi. A random visit from Shampoo caused Ranma to disappear for over 3 hours as he practiced his new hobby until things started to hurt. Kintaro never helped either. He would just pour gasoline on the fire. Like when he convinced Ranma to go to Hafasai's room to get back Akane's underwear for her. Never mind that it gave him a chance to shove it into his face and breathe deeply of her most private scent. Ranma spent school fidgeting with anxiety that everyone could see and hear everything Kintaro kept saying to him. Like when he accidentally saw up Akane's skirt, he felt his whole face flush as Kintaro said the most lewd and degrading things that Ranma had ever imagined before in his life. During the week, buzz started sounding around school about a party that Tariwake Kuno was throwing at his mansion. It seemed that it was an open invitation with free food. Ranma had briefly thought of crashing it, though he fully suspected his name wasn't on the list. When he saw Akane talking to Kuno. And for the first time since Ranma had met Kintaro, he saw him standing next to him when he wasn't erect. Ranma glanced at Kintaro before looking back as he saw Akane laughing at something that Kuno said. Kintaro scowled. What is she doing laughing at his jokes? Ranma shook his head. Maybe she is just trying to get him to leave her alone. Kintaro growled. No, she walked up to him, remember? Is she cheating on us? Ranma wanted to scream, but instead he spoke through clenched teeth. She better have a good explanation for talking to him. The conversation seemed to wind down, and Akane smiled at Kuno as she walked away. She shouted back, Okay, senpai, I'll see you at the party. Akane turned around smiling when she saw Ranma and Ukyo staring at her. What was that, Akane? Ranma yelled at her. Akane crossed her arms in front of her and answered back, I was just asking if we'd all be able to go to the party. Kintaro yelled, "Oh my god, she wants to fuck Kuno!" "What the hell, Akane? You're suddenly into Kuno or something?" Ranma yelled. Akane's eyes grew wide before she narrowed them in anger. "No, you dummy! Maybe I just thought a party would be fun." Ranma clenched and unclenched his fists. He could feel tears building up in his eyes. By now a crowd was starting to gather, with Nabiki goading them on to fight. Ranma's throat clenched, and he let out a long-held breath. And with as much control as he could, Ranma opened his hands as wide as they would go and said, "Fine, go with Kuno to his stupid party. I have other fiancés I can go with." Before Akane could even respond to that, Ranma was gone. There we go. This is entertaining background. Things are getting heavy. Thank you, thank you. Glad to be of service. This is some fun stuff. Alright, we're going to the next scene. Ranma was in the dojo, just beating the hell out of one of the practice dummies. Kintaro had followed him home and was shadowboxing the same dummy. Ranma couldn't stand whatever it was that Akane had done. What had she done? Kintaro continued to shout as he punched. "How dare she dump you? We should rape her. Show her what she's missing. What's it called when you rape someone without permission?" Ranma stopped punching. He looked at Kintaro and just shook his head. "I think that's just rape." Kintaro started humping the training dummy and shouted, "Yeah, we should do that." Ranma thought about hurting Akane and all his anger deflated. Suddenly he just felt sick from the thoughts that had been running through his head. Ranma almost threw up from the thoughts and forcefully shouted, "No!" Kintaro looked at Ranma and shrugged. He started walking into one of the shadows in the dojo. As he started fading out, he said, "Well, I have to go hang out with Ryoga. Seems like he remembered one time when he saw your girl's side naked. See ya." There's a smaller scene there. We got another viewer. Thank you for showing up. Thank you. Hope you're enjoying this. This is Ranma's Big Mouth, a fanfic I wrote 2 years ago. Sorry, I don't have anything really set up to see people following or anything, so I apologize if you did a follow and I didn't see. Alright, let's go to the next scene here. Akane lay on her sister's bed crying to Nabiki. With a wail, she continued telling her what happened that afternoon in school. "And he went and left before I could explain that I wanted to go with him." Nabiki gave Akane's back a few heavy pats. With a sigh, she stopped and leaned back in her own desk chair and said, "Look, little sis, it seems to me like you're just getting a taste of some of your own medicine." That was a quick scene, so I'm gonna keep going. Ranma couldn't quite face up to Akane yet. He instead decided to skip dinner at home and headed over to the Neko Hanten. Preferring to have hot soup to soothe his throat than okonomiyaki. When he got there, shampoo immediately oozed onto him, immediately causing Kintaro to pop up behind Ranma and shout, "Look at those titties! They're pressed up against your arm, man! Can you feel the nipples? Her nipples are hard and are pushing right into your arm!" Ranma tried desperately to ignore Kintaro as he smiled at Shampoo. Ranma looked down at his pants and realized he needed a way to hide the effect Shampoo was having on him, and fast. So he quickly found an empty table and sat down. Shampoo managed to stick to him the entire time, and she cooed into Ranma's ear. Ranma nervously cleared his throat and said, "Hey, Shampoo, do you think I can get something to eat?" Shampoo traced her hand from Ranma's face down to his chest, and as she reached past his belly, she could feel him completely tighten up. Shampoo stopped moving her arm and started drawing little circles along Ranma's stomach. She looked up into his eyes, which were storming with all sorts of emotions. Shampoo smiled brightly at Ranma and said, "Of course, Aiden. Shampoo glad to give food. If Ranma takes Shampoo on date." Ranma laughed, his free hand moving up the back of his neck. Ranma looked away and mumbled. He looked back at Shampoo and realized she didn't hear him. So he cleared his throat and said, "Actually, that's why I came here." Ayah! Apologize for my bad Shampoo impression there. Oh, no, this is a Ranma 1/2 fanfiction, so Shampoo is a character from that show. Alright. Actual Shampoo bottle. Plot twist, actual Shampoo bottle. Welcome to the new viewers. We're reading some Ranma 1/2 fanfiction that I wrote about 2 years ago, so I'm going to keep going to the next scene now. The Kuno mansion was kicking with a party that included not only Furukin High students, but kids from the St. Hebetike's School for Girls. Akane was in a corner hanging out with Ukyo and Konatsu, and trying very hard to not be spotted by Tadewake. Bad enough that she was trying to get Ranma to come, and partially promised Tadewake that his pigtailed goddess might show up. Although with Ranma coming with one of the other girls, not giving her a chance to talk to him, means that she might have to backtrack on her conversation with Kuno. Akane was also having trouble looking at Konatsu, and sometimes even Ranma. Ever since the night... Did I skip a scene? I'm sorry, guys. I did skip a scene. Where did it go? Hold on. I did skip a scene, I'm sorry. Sorry for the skipped scene, guys. Apologies. I just realized it when I got to here. Alright, we're gonna trace back to the night before. Sorry about that. Konatsu was crying atop his bed. He sat there on his knees, exposed completely as Akane was inches from his erect member. Ukyo was nearby as she described all the parts of the penis as she read from the school biology book. Akane would then point to that part that Ukyo mentioned, sometimes even touching Konatsu as the poor guy wept. "Ukyo-sama, you know I'm just a simple girl. This is too much." Ukyo smiled and said, "I'll pay you triple time for this, Konatsu." Suddenly, with images of 30 yen dancing across his vision, Konatsu relented and tolerated the embarrassing prodding from the youngest Tendo sister. Alright, skip back to the party. Sorry about that. Akane was also having trouble looking at Konatsu and sometimes even Ranma. Ever since the night Ukyo gave her the birds and bees lecture with a live model, Akane kept remembering the penis of those boys more so than their actual face, which meant sometimes when she would look at them, their face would be their penis instead. Needless to say, she was starting to feel freaked out. A faster song came on and Ukyo asked Akane to join her and Konatsu for a dance. But Akane chose to not spend any more time with the supple penis head of Konatsu, and to also avoid placing herself in a situation where she'd be more visible to Tadewake. Feeling thirsty, Akane ventured towards a table that had drinks and snacks, and it was then that she saw Ranma and Shampoo walk into the party. Shampoo immediately dragged Ranma to an open area and they began dancing. The wild beats of the dance and the crazy rhythm kept the two somewhat apart from each other, much to Akane's relief. Suddenly the music changed and Akane felt a presence behind her. Turning around, she saw Kuno there in his tuxedo, which was absolutely ridiculous considering the dress code for the rest of the party. Akane knew, bad at typing, this cost was coming, but she had hoped Ranma as the pigtailed girl would be there to soften the cost. Instead, he was dancing with Shampoo. During the slow dance even. Kuno guided Akane to the dance floor, and she seethed at how Ranma let Shampoo rub all the way up against him. The two of them were slowly grinding into each other. Shampoo was even shoving her mons pubis, thanks Ukyo for clearing that up, into Ranma's obvious erection. The slut! After the slow dance was over, Akane excused herself and went upstairs, trying to get away from Kuno, from Ranma, from everything. Yeah, sorry about that time skip, guys. Miss Scene is now flashback. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Welcome. How old were you when you wrote this? I only wrote this 2 years ago. This is extremely recent. This is extremely recent. It's meant to be a combination parody of both Ranma and Big Mouth. So this is Ranma's Big Mouth. So there's certain stylistic choices in what I'm doing here. But thank you for coming to watch as I read my fan fiction, my old fan fiction. Next scene. After the slow dance in which Ranma could do nothing but breathe heavily so he didn't lose control, another fast dance started. At which point, Shampoo turned around and in rhythm to that crazy beat, she began rubbing her rear end up and down on Ranma's pronounced tent. Kintaro had his arms over Ranma's shoulders, practically drooling as Ranma whispered, "Oh Kami, oh Kami, oh Kami," over and over again. That's when it happened. Ranma lost all control, and he experienced a sensation he had become all too familiar with this week. In a panic, before Shampoo noticed the wetness on the front of his pants, or before anyone else noticed the stain, Ranma ran upstairs, past Akane, and into the bathroom. Ranma took off his pants and put the crotch into the sink, hoping to wash off his shame. He pulled away his underwear and shuddered. This entire week of sloughing off excess spunk, and this was easily the most Ranma had ever made. The mess was traveling down his leg. Ranma reached for toilet paper and started wiping his leg clean. When he looked up to check on his pants, he caught Akane's reflection in the mirror. Ranma instantly grabbed his wet pants and held it up in front of him while shouting, "It's not what it looks like!" Akane looked at the wet pants, the glob of goop on the ground, and Ranma's guilty face. She remembered how Shampoo had been dancing with Ranma, and the lessons Ukyo gave her. She remembered Kasumi's massive jungle-like bush. Akane took a deep breath and steadied herself. Finally, her eyes met Ranma's and she asked, "So you didn't jizz yourself while dancing with Shampoo and then throw your pants in the sink, getting them all wet?" Ranma looked around and then sighed. He answered, "Well, then I guess it is what it looks like. Sorry about this." Akane laughed and walked up to Ranma and gave him a hug, carefully making sure her hips were away from his wet pants. She hugged him for a moment before letting him go and saying, "Ranma, don't let Shampoo sexually harass you. Also, why did you soak your pants?" Ranma sighed. "I panicked, okay? I've never had this happen before and I didn't want my pants to stain. Now what am I gonna do?" Connie smiled as an idea came to her. Cupping her hands under the running water, she splashed Ranma with the cold water. With a laugh, Akane said, "I think I have an idea." Alright. Let's see. We have a scene break. What we got? Miss Scene is now fine. Yeah, we got that. Just Google Shampoo. 10 out of 10 waifu. Yes, she is. She is amazing. So much fun. Next scene. Akane traded her dress for Ranma's shirt, and then wore his large shirt as if it were a mini dress. Ranma looked pretty good in her dress, now that she looked at the boy-turned-girl. Feeling brave, half naked in the hall of Kuno's mansion, Akane suddenly leaned over and gave Ranma a kiss on the cheek. When Ranma didn't run, Akane got braver and turned her head and kissed Ranma on the lips. They gave and parted. After a moment, Akane pulled away and smiled. She said, "Well then, let's go enjoy the party." Ranma looked around, feeling like maybe Kentaro should have showed up. But he didn't. He almost started to smile. Which is when Nabiki came out of the shadows holding the video camera. With a big smile, Nabiki asked, "So when's the wedding?" And that was episode 1 of my Ranma Big Mouth parody entitled Ejaculation. Let's go to... We'll get chapter 2 loading here. And I misclicked something, so I need to wait for something to pop up. Any questions about the chapter so far? We got everybody enjoying themselves. How many of you guys have actually seen Ranma 1/2 before? I know Lame Vision has. It seems like Omni 17 is the first time hearing about Ranma 1/2. What about Baron Greyfallow? Have you seen Ranma 1/2 before? Are you still with us? I don't know. My viewer chat list keeps not updating. All right, I think we're down to just a few people then. All right. Well, let me go back. Chapter 2 is entitled "Everybody Bleeds." 3 weeks Ranma has been female. Ranma had been so frustrated with being unable to control when Kentaro was showing up that Ranma had just spent 3 weeks without changing back to being a guy. It was kind of nice, finally feeling control of his life again. After the party, Ranma realized that as a girl, Kentaro wouldn't show up. The other bonus was that ever since that night at the party, Akane hadn't once blown up at him. They would even sometimes kiss again. It was a wonderful feeling that he was just so happy to experience. Although, now that everything was starting to finally seem to be working out, their parents just seemed to decide to force the issue of the wedding. It was bad enough before, but now they kept going on and on about how the two of them were finally being lovey-dovey. Ranma was starting to look forward to moments where he could be at school. Somewhere, he could at least be away from his father's incessant pressuring. At least it wasn't Kentaro. He could just imagine the perverse things Kentaro would be making Ranma do to Akane now that the two of them were on such friendly terms. At school, the two tried to not be too close together, mostly to avoid being harassed by the other nosy students, but also not to start a war with Ukyo. Ukyo, for her part, had heard about the kiss at the party, but she wasn't sure how much to believe. Having Ranma and Akane behaving so civil to one another, though, was straining her resolve to not jump to conclusions. Ukyo wanted nothing more than to spend more time with Ranma, and by the end of the week she thought she might have a chance. Their entire grade was going on a trip to Kyoto, and once there, she wouldn't have any other responsibilities like her store preventing her from spending time with her Ranchan. That's opening scene. Oh, yeah. The basic concepts of per episode were used, but there's a lot of finagling to make it fit into Ranma 1/2. So yeah, there's this is a little bit raunchier than that show as well. So early morning at the school grounds, Akane stood with Ukyo waiting for the buses that would take them to Kyoto, as well as Ranma, who was running late that morning. They were both wearing casual clothes, and they had a travel bag with them as they would be spending a few days there. Ukyo was talking to Akane about different essentials they had packed when Ranma, still as a girl, showed up wearing white cargo shorts and a blue top. Ukyo struggled to cover her surprised face, and managed to just barely say without too much of a hitch in her voice, Why is Ranma honey still a girl? Akane shrugged. She looked at Ranma's cute outfit, recognizing the short from the Biki's closet, and the top being from one of Ranma's other outfits. He also had an overnight bag with him. Akane shrugged and said, I don't know. He hasn't bothered to change since the party. He even has been acting nicer recently. Ukyo humphed. And I assume you've been taking advantage of that? Akane looked away, trying to avoid Ukyo's inquisitive stare. I don't know how that became a square. That's interesting. Stare. She kept turning as Ukyo walked around her, trying to see her face. Akane could feel a smile trying to force itself onto her face, and she quickly slapped her hands onto her face to try to force the smile away. Akane finally ducked down and buried her head into her knees to avoid Ukyo. She quietly answered, I have no idea what you mean. Ukyo shook her head. Then after looking at Ranma again as he was talking with a couple of his classmates, Ukyo squatted down next to Akane and in a whisper asked, So you've been doing something even though he's been a girl? Akane nodded. Ukyo sighed and then looked back to Ranma, that feeling of losing him sitting again at the pit of her stomach. This conversation proved a lot of things, many of which implied a bit more gender fluidity and sexuality in Akane and Ranma than even Ukyo had assumed before. It also meant that she had to get Ranma to go just as far with her if she had any hope of surpassing Akane as a favorite fiancé. That's another scene down. Let's check in to see if we got any. Here's. Thank you for watching. Thank you for hanging out. I hope everybody listening is having a good time. Hiroshi and Daisuke were currently teasing Ranma about rumors that he had made out with Akane at Kuno's party as a girl. They were also making a point that Ranma's insistence of staying in girl form implied that Akane was probably a lesbian. Then they started asking what lesbian sex was like, although those questions seemed to be said in a very curious way rather than in lecherous tones like the other comments. Ranma, for his part, was just mostly ignoring the questions and comments. He hadn't been feeling well that morning, and he almost didn't go on the trip. It was only because Mr. Tendo and his father kept insisting that he should spend vacation with Akane that had Ranma even bothering with this trip. To top it off, he forgot to tell Kasumi about the trip, so he had to borrow clothes from the Biki for quite the markup, which just irritated him to all get out. It was when Hiroshi asked if Ranma and Akane 69, whatever that meant, that Ranma told them to shut up and went to see why Akane and Ukyo were squatting in conversation and had their heads very close to each other, sharp whispers being exchanged between the two. Ranma didn't quite know how to feel about it, but as he approached, the two girls quickly stopped their conversation and stood up. Ukyo looked at Ranma, and with a grimace, Ukyo said, So, Ranma, I hear you and Akane have been doing some things. Does this mean you made a decision? Ranma's mouth went dry, and immediately a bead of sweat began to roll down his face. All the blood drained from his face, and his eyes grew large as he recognized the accusatory glare that Ukyo was giving him. Ranma then looked over at Akane, her face crimson and her eyes averted from his. Kissing. Ranma's face suddenly flushed. His guts, which were already a hive of pain and misery, suddenly flushed warmly, and Ranma felt a slight ease to whatever illness was affecting him. Ranma looked back to Ukyo and answered, I'm not sure what it means. I mean, I guess we're all fiancés, so it's not anything wrong, right? Ukyo smiled, nodded, and moved up to Ranma and kissed him. Akane bristled, and Ranma felt a sensation in his neck as it moved down his spine, eliciting goosebumps all the way down to his arms. Suddenly, Ukyo's tongue was in his mouth, and Ranma felt like he peed himself a little. But it was just this terribly warm feeling in his shorts. When they finally finished the kiss, not only had the bus arrived, but the entire grade was staring at the couple as Akane did everything in her power not to start raging. Ranma swallowed, and Ukyo smiled at him before saying, "Well then, I think I'm going to enjoy our new status, honey." Ukyo walked away, pulling Akane with her to prevent her from sitting with Ranma on the bus. Ranma sat there so long that Daisuke had to drag him onto the bus and sat next to him by the window, across the lane from Daisuke. Ranma stared out the window for the next 6 hours. Alright, that's another scene down. Hope everybody's enjoying. Let's get some emoticons. Every time I finish a scene, if you don't mind, let's get some emoticons going about how you feel. Just trying to get a beat on this, you know what I mean? Know what I'm saying? My wife does not know what I'm saying. She's right next to me and she's just shaking her head at me as I read this filth on the internet. Let's go. Next scene. The bus ride was a bit loud as everyone talked excitedly about different places to visit in Kyoto. Yet, at the back of the bus, where Akane and Ukyo sat, the conversation was very different. The two of them were instead talking about their fiancée, who is currently their girlfriend. Akane was loath to admit how much kissing she had actually been doing with Ranma, especially since Ranma had stayed a girl, which aided in abating the visual hallucinations of penis face that Akane had been suffering a few weeks prior. It also confused and embarrassed her how much she enjoyed feeling Ranma's breast pressed up against her as they would sneak kisses in small moments of peace in the house. Ukyo, though, seemed to feel perfectly fine kissing Ranma as a girl in front of everyone. She was even dressed as a boy in her casual clothes, jeans and a t-shirt, as well as a jacket that made her look like a very beautiful boy. Akane shook away her assessment of her rival and threw it away. She didn't need to be picturing Ukyo with a penis right now. She didn't need to feel the stupid emptiness in her belly. Akane looked away from Ukyo, ignoring her set of questions about how far she had gotten with Ranma. Akane didn't exactly feel like sharing information. She wasn't like Ukyo. She wasn't into being some sort of pervert in public. Akane finally shook her head and said, "Can we just talk about this later?" Ukyo acquiesced and went back to looking out the window. She still didn't want to jump to conclusions. Akane not wanting to talk doesn't mean that she and Ranma were having sex. I mean, sure it felt like that, but it didn't mean it. Ukyo sighed again and proceeded to block out the rest of the trip. Got another scene break. Thank you. Love the hearts. Yeah, no problem. I keep enjoying the story. Just trying to check in on everybody. Or, you and somebody else. Let's keep going. Got the next scene coming. The hotel was extremely nice, and they had managed to fit 8 students to a room. With some finessing from Ukyo and Akane, they managed to have Ranma in their room, with 5 other girls from another one of the classes. This not only allowed them to not have to worry about only one of them being with Ranma, but the other classes had less knowledge about Ranma and his gender swapping. After dropping their bags off in the hotel and eating a light lunch, the kids all went and took the train up to Nijo Castle. Ranma rode with Ukyo and Akane, which left them feeling rather exhausted and thirsty. Ukyo would publicly molest Ranma, while Akane would sneak him around corners to make out with him in brief, quick bursts. Ranma was beginning to notice that the more humiliating Ukyo's molestations were, Akane's ministrations would increase in intensity. By the time they reached Nijo Castle, Ranma could hardly tell who he was kissing anymore. Unfortunately for Akane, her friends Sayuri and Yuka pulled her away from Ranma to go toward the castle. Akane demanded Ranma swear to meet her near the Homaro Castle keep. Ranma agreed and began walking with Ukyo. Soon the two of them were alone, or at least not surrounded by anyone from their school. Ukyo did one last look round before asking Ranma. So, Ranma honey, be honest with me. How far have you and Akane gotten? Ranma stiffened. But with everything that had happened that day, Ranma relaxed and said, pretty much the same as today. I think today is probably the most that's happened. Ukyo stopped as Ranma kept walking a bit. Shaking her head, smiling that she still had a chance, Ukyo began to catch up to Ranma, when something caught her eye. She shouted for Ranma to wait up and said, Ranma honey, you have something on your shorts. It looks like you sat on something. Ranma stopped and looked at his pants. There was a red stain on it. Ranma touched it and moved his fingers up to his nose and smelled it. His face scrunched up, and he looked at Ukyo, panic setting into his eyes. He said, It's blood. Ukyo stiffened, and she suddenly realized exactly what was happening to Ranma. She also realized that all her supplies were in the hotel, that Ranma's shorts were ruined. Nodding for Ranma to follow her, Ukyo said, Come on, let's get you to a bathroom first. We can solve this one step at a time from there. Ranma nodded and followed Ukyo. Together in a bathroom stall, Ukyo was trying to get Ranma to take off his shorts. Finally, in frustration, Ukyo said, You know, I already helped Akane with this kind of thing. Let me help you. Ranma stopped struggling and nodded. He pulled down the shorts, and even his boxers, and there it was, just soaked in blood and traveling down his leg. Ukyo explained to Ranma that it was his period. She got some bathroom tissue and cleaned Ranma as best she could, and had him sit down. Getting the stare of death from my wife right now. Oh my god. Oh god, I just can't. Oh, I'm getting so... Didn't expect that period turn of events. What is happening? Sorry. My wife gave me such a death stare that I could just not keep talking. Oh man. And had him sit down. Sign, Ukyo explained briefly what was happening, and what they would have to do to get Ranma through that day. With the plan established, Ukyo made sure Ranma knew to wait in the stall until she was back. Getting the briefest of nods, Ukyo left, and found herself leaving the castle in search of a nearby shop that would have the kind of things she would need. I'm gonna keep going since I had to take a break for laughing so hard. Akane waved goodbye to her friends as she waited in front of the Honmaru Castle Keep. The place was usually sealed off, but gardens around it were available. She wanted to walk the gardens with Ranma, and she just had to wait for Ukyo and him to catch up with her. Shouldn't be too much longer. I mean, sure, it has already been an hour, but it would be worth the wait. I mean, as public as Ukyo was with her affections, they surely wouldn't be having sex in the castle. I mean, even Ukyo would have some sort of limits, right? Right? Akane began to pace around. So I'll do that as the pause. 2 scenes read. Thank you. Yeah, this is I kind of go crazy with my stories sometimes, so let's go. Ranma sat on the toilet, his eyes puffy from tears. He looked between his legs where his vagina was bleeding like a girl. Who was he kidding? Ranma closed his eyes and took a deep, shuddering breath. When she opened her eyes, she looked down again at her vagina. She was a woman now. No matter what she could ever say about her curse, she realized that this was a real body. It wasn't a cursed body. She was real. It was 2 hours being in the stall when Ukyo came back. Ranma stood up and opened the stall for her. Ukyo came in quickly, shutting the door behind her. Ranma cleaned up again with more bathroom tissues and then watched as Ukyo opened up a package and removed a little wrapped pad. She put it on a pair of panties and then asked Ranma to put it on. Ranma nodded and slipped on the panties as Ukyo explained their purpose. Ukyo then handed Ranma a skirt from a bag. Ranma put it on and stood there, waiting as Ukyo put Ranma's dirty boxers and shorts into a bag that had held the skirt. Ukyo tied off the bag and handed it with the other bag that had the package of pads in it. Together, they both washed their hands and stepped outside. Ranma looked out and saw a nearby garden with a row of plum trees. The pink waving leaves rustled in the wind, and Ranma could no longer hold back. She began to cry and took Ukyo in a deep embrace. Her head pressed up to Ukyo's chest as she shuddered in a deep sob. Ukyo patted Ranma's back, a grimace gracing her face as she held her fiancé in her arms. That's another scene. Alright, do we have any new viewers? We're still at 2. That's cool, that's cool. Let's keep going. Pog. Pog. Alright. Clicking all the wrong buttons here. Here we go. The group had made it back to the hotel, and Akane found Ranma sitting down on a bench in the hotel, talking with Ukyo. Akane stomped up to Ranma, letting her aura and fury manifest in her heavy steps and deep breathing. She took a deep breath, trying to keep calm, but as she spoke, her voice got harsher. Ranma, what happened? What the actual fuck? I was waiting for over 3 hours for you to show up. Ranma cringed at Akane's voice, and Ukyo quickly got up and tried to pull Akane away, speaking quiet platitudes to try and get Akane to calm down enough before she got out of hand. Akane, for her part, pulled out of Ukyo's grip and shook her head. Ukyo whispered to Akane, "Calm down, Akane. You need to maybe not be doing this right now." Akane snorted and looked back at Ranma. She shouted again, this time attracting the attention of everyone in the lobby. "Well, Ranma, why didn't you show up?" Akane kept repeating the question. Each time, Ranma tried to shrink further into herself. Finally, Ranma couldn't run anymore. She couldn't shrink any further. With tears in her eyes, Ranma shouted right back at Akane, "I got my first period today. I got blood on Nabiki's white shorts, and now I'm going to have to pay full price for it. I bled in a pair of white fucking shorts." That's that scene there. Not like this. Not like this. Hold on, let me get a drink. Little drink break here. Got more of this chapter to go. Back in their room, Ranma locked herself in the bathroom to replace her pad. As she pulled her panties up, she looked at herself in the mirror, her padded panties sticking out ridiculously, making her feel like a baby in diapers. She pulled on her skirt that Ukyo had bought her, and as she stood back up, she saw a ninja girl in the mirror. Ranma couldn't feel the ninja's ki, and with a sigh, Ranma turned around to look at the girl. The ninja girl had long, purple hair done up in a top knot, with an overly egregious, giant pink bow. Her shizuko, which is her ninja outfit, was a horrendous lime green. She tilted her head to the side, and with a smile and a voice that was entirely too bubbly, said, "Hello, Ranma. I'm Miko, your hormone kami. Sorry I'm late." Ranma wanted to scream. This kami was not subtle. She was a mishmash of color and purpose, bright, nearly neon coloring on a ninja. A hormone kami that shows up when Ranma wasn't even feeling horny. Ranma loudly whispered at Miko, "What are you doing here? I'm not even feeling horny. Just pain and yuckiness." Miko laughed and moved in close to Ranma, causing Ranma to step back slightly. She lingered there, exuding the confidence that Ranma couldn't quite understand. She whispered to Ranma, "Oh, Ranma, my delicious little unagi. You don't want to just go fingering yourself silly. You want to show the world that you are a woman. You want to scream at your mom and then laugh at her tears. You want to sing karaoke until your throat is so raw that you can't even make a sound anymore." Ranma shook her head, backing herself into a wall as Miko followed her, step by step. Ranma spoke in an unsteady voice. I don't want to yell at my mom." Miko moved up to Ranma until they were cheek to cheek. She whispered, "She's not your mother, Ranma. Her name is Nadoka." "But she said I can't be a girl." "She's old, Ranma. Her time has passed. You're young. You're free. You can make your own choices." Ranma inhaled the scent from Miko's hair. She shuddered, her mind bouncing from sensation to sensation. "You smell amazing." Miko laughed softly. "That's because I never shower and only take sexy ninja baths." Gonna keep going because we're at the very end here. On the next scene, Akane sat next to Ukyo. She tried apologizing, but that didn't feel right, and the words caught in her throat. Shaking herself free of her doubts, Akane finally said, "Thank you for taking care of Ranma." Ukyo nodded, wondering how much all the troubles the girls were having with Ranma before was due to a lack of maturity from Ranma. It was like he never developed typical male thoughts until recently. Heck, it seemed he even beat Akane to having a first period. Her thoughts were interrupted when Ranma came out of the bathroom. Ranma went to sit down by herself, pointedly away from Akane and Ukyo. The other girls in the room gave her sympathetic looks, having heard what happened to her earlier in the day. Akane sighed as she saw the distance that Ranma had put between them, and Ukyo joined her. Ranma pulled out a brochure from the table near where she sat, and after looking through it, she took it over to Akane and Ukyo and said, "Hey, you think we can go to this karaoke place? Apparently it's very famous." And that is Chapter 2, Episode 2, Everybody Bleeds, of the Ranma's Big Mouth fanfic. Not full price. Hormone Kamiya. I see the Big Mouth influence now. Yeah. With all the hormone commies. Yeah, the paying full price in the Biki is usually paying about a 500% markup. Alright. Let's go episode 3. Episode 3 is titled Am I Gay? So you can kind of see how that's going to go. Thank you so much for hanging out. I really appreciate it, Lane Vision. I'm glad you're enjoying the story. I'm going to keep going now. Chapter 3. And let's see, we've been at this for about an hour now. Got 3 chapters out of the way, or 2 chapters out of the way. So here we go. Dark beats and jazz melodies echoed through the halls of the karaoke club as a female Ranma left with Ukyo and Akane, all 3 of them glistening with sweat and laughing. As they exited into the chill night air, Ranma was greeted by the ever-surly face of Ryoga Hibiki. In less than a second, a declaration of death had been issued, and Ranma and Ryoga battled their way down the street. Ranma spiraled away from a hook kick, using the momentum to move around Ryoga and grab him by the waist, and with a lift she suplexed her opponent, leaving him stunned enough for her to gain some breathing room. She held her belly, trying to keep the strange twittering feeling in check, and failing completely to do so. Ryoga stood back up after a bit and quickly regained his focus on Ranma. With a snarl, he resumed his attacks, while ignoring Ranma's pleas for peace. She was fighting one-handed now, protecting her stomach extra carefully, while slapping Ryoga's punches with precision and intensity that was starting to grate on Ryoga's nerves. Miko came out of the shadows, keeping up with Ranma as she fought Ryoga. Parry, counter, dodge. Ranma was focusing on keeping her one-handed defense. Miko analyzed the fight and looked over and at Ranma before saying, "You know at this pace you're going to lose." Ranma snarled back at the incongruent ninja. "I know, but the stupid cramp is feeling worse." Miko nodded and answered, "This is the kind of thing every woman goes through. This level of pain is normal for women to experience. Makes you wonder who's the stronger of the two sexes, doesn't it?" Ranma grimaced as memories of her father's words of how women were weak surfaced to the forefront of her mind. She took a large leap in retreat from Ryoga's recent flurry and tried to breathe through the pain. When Miko joined her, Ranma said, "Well, I need to do something to slow him down." Miko smiled mischievously. "Well, it is rather cold, Ranma. You could easily tear off his shirt and use it as a manacle to keep his arms behind him. That would stop him long enough for you to use the Saotome final technique." Ranma nodded. Now all she needed to do was execute the plan. Ryoga had finally caught up to her, and she was starting to feel the adrenaline of the fight punching in. That also meant that the pain was fading, which gave her a window to execute the new strategy. Ranma ducked under an overextended punch and elbowed Ryoga in the solar plexus. Grabbing the front of the shirt, Ranma dragged her arms down, using clawed hands to tear away Ryoga's shirt. She then grabbed onto a flap and spun around Ryoga, pulling the shirt halfway down his arms and then twisting it and pulling up, locking the boy's arms in place and keeping him off balance. Ranma shouted at Ryoga to stop fighting, while Miko came up next to her. Miko peered over Ryoga's locked arms and whistled appreciatively. She gave Ranma a foxy grin and said, "Look at these muscles, Ranma. His rhomboid muscles are insanely well developed." Ranma peered over to Ryoga's shoulder blades, and suddenly her mouth went dry. Ryoga's muscled back strained in its attempt to break out of Ranma's hold, and it flexed the entirety of his physicality. Ranma actually found herself wanting to feel every muscle, to see what such a powerful body felt like under her hand. Ukyo and Akane chose that moment to catch up to the fight. While Akane lectured the half-naked Ryoga, Ranma decided to walk over to Ukyo to wait until they could leave, all the while trying to ignore the images in her mind. So we got another scene break there. Yeah, an awesome fighting scene. Is this even the same story? Yes. Ranma thirsty now. Yeah, that's it. All keeps leading to that. Thank you for the compliment on the awesome fighting scene. I appreciate that. Akane stared down at the white pair of panties between her legs as she sat on the toilet. There was a small speck of blood on it. This was it. She was having her period. Just like school and Ukyo had taught her. She was lucky enough to not only be in a skirt, but to have gotten to the restroom before she bled too severely. Now she just had to get a pad, which she had none of. With a sigh, she was glad to hear someone enter the next stall. With a deep breath, to fight off nervousness and anxiety of what she was about to do, Akane asked the stranger in the next stall for a pad. "Akane?" the voice in the next stall asked, resembling Ranma's entirely too much for her comfort. Akane nodded. Then, realizing that the other person couldn't see her, she said, "Yes?" Suddenly, Ranma's female hand reached under the stall and passed a pad to Akane. With a giggle, Ranma said, "Here you go." We're catching up here. Next scene. Ranma sat in the tub of the hotel shower as hot water rained down on her body from the shower head. Each drip etched a new sin upon her flesh as it refused to return her to her male body. Why did she give it up so easily? Was it really that hard dealing with Kintaro? Was her manhood so easily discarded for what she thought was an easy way out? Akane and Ukyo kissing her and not fighting over it didn't help sell her on returning to a male body either. Everything might have even worked out if Miko hadn't shown up. With that bloody, bleeding blight. Why do women have to suffer so much? If it was someone punching her in her stomach, Ranma would be able to withstand it. But this was pain in such a way that she had no way to shore up a defense for it. It was internal and consistent. Miko pulled the shower curtain away slightly, almost making Ranma jump out of her skin. With a glare at the female hormone Kami, Ranma stood up and began soaping up. Miko frowned and asked, "What's wrong, my little salmon skin roll?" Ranma waved her hand over her body, indicating the entirety of herself, and answered, "I'm not changing back into a guy with hot water." Miko nodded and stepped into the shower as naked as Ranma. She wrapped her arms around Ranma from behind, her hands resting on Ranma's belly. She pressed down lightly, energy radiating from it, easing Ranma's pain. With a nibble to Ranma's ear, she left her feeling the strange tingling. Miko said, "It seems your curse is affected by your curse. While you're on your period, you won't change back." Ranma groaned. Miko whispered, "Don't worry, it's meant to protect the baby in case you're pregnant." Ranma began to pound her forehead on the shower wall. Alright, there's another scene there. So, we got quite a bit of setup here. Really, really, really keep going here. Thank you. Seems good. Alright, let's go. Next scene. The bus ride back found Ranma sitting next to Hiroshi and Daisuke again. Except this time, he was more alert and away from the window. The three were talking about a recent manga release, with Ranma fantasizing about the possibility of mimicking some of the attacks in real life. The conversation took a turn when Ranma's two friends started talking about the girl of the week that the hero was flirting with. Oh, my wife is leaning up on me. So beautiful. The hero of the week that the girl of the week that the hero was flirting with. Ranma tried to picture herself with the girl, but for some reason she kept picturing the hero instead. He was drawn very heavily muscled in the comic, and she just kept picturing his strong arms holding her safely. Ah! Ranma swore under her breath. Anyways, can we talk about something else? Her friends complied, and she was able to rejoin the conversation when they started talking about an anime involving three magical girls who loved each other. At least Ranma was able to point out how uncomfortable some of the kissing scenes would be, considering how anatomy would have gotten in the way. Hiroshi and Daisuke each pulled out notebooks and started getting tips from Ranma on how to kiss. Moving on to the next scene. I'm just keep checking on chat every once in a while, so sorry for the breaks. I use the scene breaks as a way to see if anybody else has joined us. Alright, next scene. Back in Narima, and Ranma was just about done with being a girl. She got attacked and molested by Kuno as soon as she got off the bus, and thanks to Akane and Ukyo's interference, she was able to get away. Her breast still smarted where Kuno had gotten her in a death grip. At least she had the weekend, and supposedly she'd be done with this whole period thing, and be able to turn back into a guy. Not feeling like dealing with her father while a girl, Ranma instead decided to visit Shampoo for a meal. Nikohanten was a bit busy, which meant that Shampoo didn't quite jump Ranma immediately. She did bring him a bowl though, which she started eating. Though not with her usual gusto. I need to update this language, excuse me. Shampoo seemed to notice as she finished tending the tables quickly and joined Ranma at her table. Shampoo sat across from Ranma and asked, Airan, what wrong? Food no good?" Ranma shook her head and continued to eat at a reasonable pace. Shampoo noticed Ranma's outfit for the first time and realized that it would not fit his male side very well. The shorts were too short for a guy, and the blouse accentuated Ranma's form instead of being baggy. Shampoo asked, "How was trip?" Ranma sighed and looked up at Shampoo. She was just going to say it was fine, but she noticed the look in Shampoo's face that she couldn't quite place. It was a little bit like Kasumi looked when Akane was sick. Ranma gave her a smile and said, I apparently spent too much time as a girl. I got a period and it locked me in my girl form. Ayah! Yeah, that just about sums it up. Shampoo at least glad Ranma stuck as girl. No one spatula girl or violent girl taking advantage. Ranma looked away from Shampoo. I mean, it wouldn't stop them. Huh? I mean, me being a girl, I don't think they care about it. Shampoo's eyes crossed as she tried to decipher the meaning from what Ranma said. Sometimes beating around the bush or using euphemisms can cloud a conversation with non-native speakers. Shampoo was no different, so she asked, "What Ranma talk about?" I think Akane and Ukyo like boys and girls. Like? Yeah, like. Shampoo took that information and tossed it in the dumpster fire. After rebooting, she asked, "Is Ranma in pain still?" Ranma looked confused for a moment, then looked down at her belly. She looked back to Shampoo and nodded. Shampoo smiled. "It's okay. Shampoo gives strong Chinese medicine. Choo good, make pain gone." Ranma thanked Shampoo as the girl got up to get the medicine. Ranma went back to finishing the ramen. Within moments, Shampoo returned and lifted Ranma's face up to hers and kissed Ranma. Ranma returned the kiss on instinct, her mouth opening slightly. Shampoo pushed the pill into Ranma's mouth from her own mouth. The two of them pulled apart, and Ranma swallowed the medicine. With a grin, she thanked Shampoo again. It's another scene break there. Gotta get everybody roped in. Mimicking attacks on girls sounds like my childhood, right? Just reading like a manga and going, Kamehameha! I used to like take off my baseball cap and throw it at my friends while shouting out different anime attacks. So that was my middle school life right there. Akane's and Ukyo's lips met at the tip of Kanatsu's dick. Their tongues wiggled back and forth on its tip. Kanatsu struggled not to moan. Their ministrations did cause the stressed transvestite to call out, "Please, you two, this is too much for an ordinary girl to be doing." Soon the girlish three-way ended with a splattering of girly love on the two real girls. Konatsu left the bedroom to go clean up, while Ukyo handed Akane a warm wet rag to clean up her face and chest. Akane looked at her former rival and newly anointed ally and asked, "Do you think Ranma will be into all this double teaming?" Ukyo nodded as she wiped away Konatsu's seed from her chest. She looked back and answered, "With the way we've been working Ranma up, he'll absolutely be into this." Akane smiled, wedding bells in her mind. What is this? There's all sorts of stuff happening here. Next scene. It was about 10 at night when Akane and Ranma happened to meet up in front of the Tendo Dojo. There was an awkward back and forth of silence as they each wondered where the other had been, and what answer they could give that wouldn't upset the other. With a sigh, Akane spoke first. "Hey." Ranma nodded back and said, "Hey." Silence. Akane looked at Ranma's face and then moved closer. Ranma recoiled slightly at the sudden movement, but stood her ground as Akane leaned in and examined Ranma's neck. Silence. Akane stood back up and looked at Ranma's face. She tilted her head to the side slightly as if considering something. Finally, Akane put both her hands on Ranma's shoulders, looked the smaller girl right in the eye and asked, "So, was it Shampoo, or is there a new girl we need to be worried about?" Ranma looked away from Akane's penetrative stare and whispered, "Shampoo?" Akane nodded and let go of Ranma. "Good. If it had been another girl, I would have had to punish you." Ranma nodded and stopped. "Wait, so there was no punishment this time?" She looked up at Akane and echoed her thoughts. "So you're okay with this?" Akane nodded. "I have no choice. She's just as involved as anyone else. Ranma nodded. Then she stopped, mostly because it was becoming a nod fest. With a shrug, they both went inside, and soon both had nodded off to sleep. Got another scene break. Things are getting intense. Yeah, chapter 3, man. That's what chapter 3s are for. Intensity. Akane came downstairs the next day to find her family and the Saotome men eating breakfast. She sat down next to Ranma and began eating. She ignored Nabiki's joke about her being late waking up. She ignored Ranma's father as he berated his son for still being a girl. She took Ranma's hand in her own, smiled at her fiancé and asked, "Think we can go on a date tonight?" The entire table was suddenly silent. They looked from Akane to Ranma. Ranma blushed under the array of stares she was experiencing. She lowered her head, trying to hide from their eyes. Breathe in, breathe out. She finally said with a slight waver in her voice, "I'd like that." The parents started dancing about the schools being joined. Nabiki whispered, "Lesbian," to a Kasumi. Kasumi giggled and covered her mouth, holding back her laugh. Akane smiled and said, "Okay, meet me at Ukchan's tonight at 6, okay?" Ranma agreed. Wait, why Ukyo's? She looked at Akane and only received a mischievous smile to her inquiring gaze. Oh, setup. Got some setup. Next scene. Ranma showed up just before 6 at Ukchan's. As she approached, she saw both Ukyo and Akane there, with Ukyo in a nice shirt and slacks and Akane in a pretty dress. Ranma herself was dressed in an open-shoulder top she borrowed from Nabiki with her black pants. As Ranma approached, Ukyo's face scrunched up a bit and she asked, "So, Ranma honey, you gonna keep up this whole girl thing? I thought you'd switch back once you experienced even day 1 of a period." Ranma laughed and tried and failed to do something with her hands. Finally, she gave up and said, "Well, apparently I can't switch back while I'm on a period." "Huh," both other girls chorused. Ranma looked between them and asked, "So, what's going on with you two?" Akane glanced at Ranma, then back to Ukyo. She nodded her head sideways to Ranma after she managed to catch Ukyo's eye. Ukyo followed the head nod until she was staring at Ranma. With a shrug, Ukyo said, "Akane and I have been talking. We kinda had a moment, and ever since we've been dating each other." "I wasn't expecting that," said Ranma. Akane walked up and hugged Ranma. Ranma, for her part, just allowed herself to be hugged. She looked to Ukyo and asked, "So what does this mean?" Ukyo smiled and said, "It means that you get to have both of us if you go Team Akane Miyaki." That's a combination of Okonomiyaki and Akane. "You get both of us, as opposed to just shampoo, or in an insane universe, Kodachi." Akane squeezed Ranma and said, "I'm going to take you on a date so you can see what it's like having 2 sexy girlfriends." Ah, so that was their plan. Eats popcorn. Great. Next scene. Ranma had to admit, having 2 girlfriends was kinda nice. Dinner was a bit more expensive than anticipated, but Ukyo covered half of it. They tried doing a 3-way kiss, which was more awkward than successful, but fun to try. It was when Akane was using the restroom that Ranma decided to get bold and put her hand on Ukyo's butt. She gave it a squeeze, which got a laugh out of Ukyo. Ranma pulled on the butt, bringing Ukyo to her, and with her other hand she brought Ukyo down for a kiss. "Ranma, prepare to die!" The yell startled Ranma, as instinct caused her to push Ukyo away and jump back at the same time. Ukyo used the push to boost as a boost to jump away. Both landed far enough away from the impact of Ryoga. The lost boy gave chase to Ranma, his umbrella swinging wildly. Ranma tried to get away. Ranma dodged an attack that rent the sign asunder. Ranma swore and yelled, "Damn it, Ryoga, can't you see I'm on a date?" Ryoga stopped and yelled back, "So you admit to cheating on Akane?" Ranma sighed and shouted, "Akane is here, you idiot!" "Where?" Ranma suddenly realized that Akane was still in the bathroom. With a sigh, she said, "She's in the bathroom." Ryoga shook his head and responded, "A likely story." The chase continued, and Ranma was starting to run out of options. She was about to run left down an alley, but Ryoga tossed some whirling bananas at her. She instead ducked into a building, and Ryoga continued to chase. Realizing it was a bathhouse, Ranma tried to turn around, but Ryoga slammed into her, sending her through the wall into the hot spring on the men's side. Ryoga stepped through the hole and glanced at a still female Ranma. Confused, Ryoga asked, "What happened? Why aren't you changing back?" Ranma gets out of the water, takes off her pants so that she can squeeze the water out. As she does this, she says, "The short answer is that I'm on my period, and that stops the curse from switching me back to a guy." Ryoga nodded and asked, "What about the long answer?" Glad to no longer be dealing with an enraged Ryoga, Ranma shrugged and said, "I started dealing with some things, and it was too much, so to avoid it, I stayed as a girl for too long, which is why I had the period in the first place." What were you trying to avoid?" "Kintaro." Ryoga blinked and asked, "The hormone Kami?" This caught Ranma's attention, and he answered, "Yeah." Ranma put on her mostly moist pants, looked back at Ryoga, and indicated for him to continue. Ryoga kind of shuffled his feet and said, "Kintaro visited me about a year ago when you pretended to be my girlfriend." "Oh," Ranma exclaimed. Then after remembering how she was with Kintaro, she blushed deeply and exclaimed, "Oh, yeah. So you've jerked off while thinking about me?" Ranma asked as she noticed Miko sneaking up behind Ryoga. Ryoga nodded. Miko started making kissy faces at Ryoga, and she was squeezing the boy's biceps. Ranma wanted to scream, but the whole conversation was starting to make her feel warm and empty, which was strange because she had just eaten. Ryoga noticed Ranma wasn't quite looking at him and asked, "What's up?" Ranma said, "Well, apparently my female side has her own hormone Kami." Ryoga blinked. Then he suddenly felt like running away, but his feet wouldn't move. Instead, he just leaned away from Ranma and stuttered, "You're horny right now?" Ryoga shrugged. "It's hard to tell when I'm a girl. Like, Miko doesn't always show up, or she'll show up when I'm not horny." "Oh," Ryoga said. "Don't sound so disappointed." "I'm not." "You're not, huh?" "No." "So you wouldn't want to kiss me right now?" Ryoga blushed. "If I wanted to kiss you, I would." "Yeah?" "Yeah!" They were nose to nose. Except this time, Akane and Ukyo didn't show up. Ryoga leaned forward and kissed Ranma. Ranma hugged him to her and kissed back. Ryoga ran his hand through her hair, parting his lips and probing deep into Ranma's mouth. Ranma took a step back, and they fall back into the hot spring. Ryoga's hand came up and caressed Ranma's breast. She moaned into his mouth, but moved his hand away from it. Ryoga moved his hand back down to her ass and squeezed it. Ranma pulled away from Ryoga and said, "Quit it, P-chan." They both stopped. Ranma was male again. "Well, this is curious," Ukyo said from the hole in the wall. Akane looked around, then looked at the two boys who they caught kissing. Where's P-chan?" And that is episode 3 of Ranma's Big Mouth. Akane Miyaki. Yeah. Lol. Damn it, Ryoga. Of course, a bathhouse. Yeah, it had to be a bathhouse. It's the curse of Ranma, right? It's always a bathhouse. Hold on, I'm getting a drink. Thank you, thank you. Wow, nice last sequence. Thank you. All right. Let's go. So that was chapter 3. Let's go to chapter 4. Still going. This one is called Sleepover, a harrowing ordeal of emotional brutality. So, thought that things were ramping up before. It's time to get brutal. Thank you. I like it. You have great writing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it. Alright. Let's see here. Let's go. Ranma finished brushing his teeth. The thought of Ryoga's hand on his masculine rear end sending a shiver up his spine. Stupid Miko, hormone kami from hell, making him feel weird sexual feelings towards Ryoga and his stupid muscle-bound rock-hard body. Ranma groaned as Kintaro stepped into view in the mirror. Kintaro laughed. Is that any way to greet me? Ranma looked down at his pants and the noticeable bulge there inside. Why is this happening? Why is Ryoga even attracted to me? Kintaro smiled brightly and answered, Well, that's my fault, you see. I've been kind of ramping things up. I got bored just hanging out with Kuno. Of course you were hanging out with Kuno. Well, I stopped. He's older now and has things more under control. Ranma spit and rinsed off his brush. He looked back at Kintaro and asked, Is that why I haven't seen him as much? Kintaro nodded. Ranma washed off some foam that was left on his lips. If Kintaro was responsible for Kuno, and Miko also just showed up, Ranma looked back to Kintaro and asked, So what's up with Miko? Kintaro stopped smiling. Ranma looked at him, waiting for an answer. With a sigh, Kintaro took off his baseball cap and scratched his head before putting the cap back on. He started answering, but he spoke slowly at first. I haven't seen her in a while. We used to be together, but we couldn't quite make it work. Ranma was about to ask another question, but Kintaro just waved at him and walked out of the bathroom, closing the door behind him. Ranma went out after him and ran into Akane on the other side of the door. Akane started to fall back, but Ranma caught her. She stammered a bit, and Ranma smiled at her. Akane smiled back and thanked him. Ranma brought her back up and gave her a light peck, just on the side of the lips. He apologized for running into her and headed out looking for Kintaro. Akane put her hand to her lips and smiled. Look at that. I can be cute. A sleepover. Pog. Aww. Akane was glad that she had the same nice feelings when she kissed Ranma as a boy that she did when she kissed him as a girl. Or Ukyo. And even when she kissed Tanatsu, but she didn't count as a boy. She was daydreaming so much she almost missed Ukchan's and had to turn around to go into it. She sat at the bar and ordered an Akane special, which was an okonomiyaki with everything, and asked, Do you think it's about time we talk to Shampoo? Ukyo humped while making the okonomiyaki and looking up at Akane said, You mean about the hickeys she left on our Ranma-chan? Is that what those are called? Ukyo nodded and added, I'm glad you at least knew what they were and was able to understand what happened to Ranma. Knowledge is key in these things. Akane smiled and said, Well, with everything you've taught me, I'm finally able to get what's happening. Ukyo served up Akane's order, with a little heart drawn and sauce on it. Akane smiled at the heart and blew a little kiss to Ukyo before digging into the food. Ranma walked around the Nerima, his gaze trying to spot the backwards hat of Kintaro, when he spotted Ryoga walking up to him. Ranma froze, trying to figure out what kind of look to give Ryoga, but the other boy's face wasn't giving him any clue on how he was doing either. Ryoga stopped in front of Ranma. They looked at each other. Ranma could swear he could still feel Ryoga's lips on his. He felt a shiver go down his spine and looked away. Ryoga growled at that and clenched his fist. Ranma saw Ryoga's fist approaching through his peripheral vision and ducked away from it. He smiled and asked, You want to fight P-chan? Ryoga nodded. Yeah, I want to kick your cute little ass. They both paused for a moment. Ryoga's face flushed red and he stammered, I, I just want to kick your ass. Ranma nodded. He turned around and stuck his ass out a bit and wiggled it. It's too cute not to be kicked. Ryoga attacked Ranma, and as Ranma evaded once again. He punched at Ryoga to get the boy to give up on a follow-through. Even though the punch didn't connect, Ranma laughed and led the boy on a 72-block running fight. By the time they finished the fight, they were several cities over, struggling to breathe and sweating through their clothes. Ranma noticed they were near their old middle school. Ranma held up both hands and said, "One stop for now? We're actually by your house." Ryoga looked around and said, "Really?" "Yeah." "Okay, but only because we're by my house." Ranma nodded and grabbed Ryoga's hand to lead him. Ryoga tried to struggle briefly, but with an admonition for Ranma, he stopped. Ryoga's house soon appeared, and after a quick search through his bag, Ryoga pulled out his house key. Once inside, Ryoga shouted a greeting, but it went unanswered. He got both of them some water. The two boys stood there, chugging down a couple of cups of water in a row. Finally calm, Ryoga took a whiff and nearly gagged. Ranma did the same and realized they were both funky beyond belief. Ryoga sighed and asked, "You want to take a shower? I can lend you some clothes while your outfit is in the washing machine." Ranma nodded and thanked Ryoga. They found no one else at home, and after grabbing a change of clothes for each of them and stripping in the hall to put the clothes in the washing machine, the two boys went into the bath. Ranma looked over at Ryoga as they washed up. Stupid, sexy Ryoga. Ranma sighed, doing his best to ignore what he could only assume was leftover thoughts from his female hormone-addled period brain. Ranma was doing a very good job not thinking about Ryoga's body until Ryoga asked Ranma to help wash his back. Ranma's hand shook as he tried to rub soap on the shower rag. He slowly reached out to Ryoga's back, his hands shaking violently. Ranma stopped. He grabbed his shaking hand and smacked it and his arm a few times until he stopped shaking. Ryoga started to turn around at the noise, but Ranma quickly started scrubbing Ryoga's back, forcing his friend to look forward again. Ryoga was sure he heard smacking noises, and so he asked, "Are you okay? What was that?" "I just had an itch is all." "Thanks for bringing me home," Ryoga said. Ranma paused for a brief moment before he continued to scrub Ryoga's back, his hand going lower to mid-back. He smiled to himself as he felt Ryoga's tight muscles, imagining himself giving his friend a massage. He looked around, but he didn't see Kentaro. He answered Ryoga after a moment, "It's no problem. I mean, we're friends after all." "We are?" "Yeah." Ryoga smiled at that. Ranma's soapy, rag-covered hand was traveling lower, grazing the top of his butt. Ryoga suddenly jumped up and moved over to the bucket to rinse off. Without a word, he turned into his piggy-cursed form after rinsing off the soap, then jumped into the ready tub. Ranma was still reaching out, not quite realizing that the soaping portion was done. He slowly brought his hand back. Suddenly his head popped up and shouted, "Hey, you never washed my back." "Oh." "What do you mean, oh?" Ryoga waved Ranma over. "Just come here, I'll wash your back from the tub." Ranma walked over and sat down on the tiled floor. Ryoga reached out of the tub and took Ranma's rag and began washing his back. Ryoga said, "You know, if we're friends, I'm going to have to stop trying to kill you." "That'll be nice." "What about martial arts? I mean, we can still be rivals." "That sounds nice." Ryoga stopped as he realized that he had washed all the way to Ranma's ass. He pulled his hand away. Ranma turned around and took the rag out of Ryoga's hand and thanked them. Back to the faucet, Ranma filled the bucket up and dumped it over his head. He nearly jumped out of his skin as Miko appeared right in front of him, out of breath and nearly feral. "You're bathing with him!" Miko nearly shouted at Ranma, and he felt the emptiness, and he felt his thighs getting wet. Ranma quickly moved to the tub faster than Ryoga could see and dunked himself completely in. Ryoga covered his face from the splash. He looked at Ranma as he surfaced and asked, "Were you a girl just now?" Ranma shook water from his hair and said, "Yeah, cold water. You didn't see anything, did you?" "No." "Good." That's that scene there. Let's check on the chat. Good stuff. Your cute little ass. 72. What? Yeah, 72 block running fight. Let's go. Non-stop. I think my perception of Ranma 1/2 has changed now. Thank you. Thank you. That's the goal of fanfiction. Goal of fanfiction is to change perception. Okay, I'm going to get a little drink before we go on to the next scene. Akane arrived at Nekohanten with a letter in hand. The letter was mostly so she could invite Shampoo without much need for saying everything out loud. Some things were still too embarrassing to say. The Nekohanten was busier than Ukchan's at this time, but Shampoo's outfit was rather scandalous that night. Akane took a booth and waited a moment for Shampoo to head over to her. She ordered beef ramen and handed Shampoo the letter. Shampoo accepted the order with professionalism, and the letter with curiosity that would kill a cat. When Shampoo came back, she set down the bowl and the letter, and agreed to visit Ukchan's that night. Akane smiled. She ate her bowl of ramen and left with a simple goodbye. Shampoo cleared off the table and began to think of what she should take to a sleepover. Neither of them noticed the letter had disappeared. Dun dun dun. This is 8 chapters. Well, 8 chapters that I finished. I started writing the 9th chapter, but then I had stopped, and that was about 2 years ago. I just didn't really have a way to wrap up the story in a way that it was going, and I wasn't really like I actually didn't like where the story was going, which is kind of funny. Um, and I didn't know how to change it, so 8 chapters and part of a 9th is how far I got. Next scene. Ryoga's clothes were a bit tight on Ranma, and on Ryoga as well, since they were from a few years earlier. Ranma was about to push the pants drawer closed when he spotted a VHS tape. Curiously, he pulled it out, and his mouth dropped open. It was a movie, with 2 men and a woman on the cover, all of them in their underwear. Kintaro's fingers curved around Ranma's shoulders. Ranma's face began to burn, and he was absolutely sure that anyone who saw him now would be able to tell he was getting excited. Kintaro's face peeked over Ranma's shoulder as together they both read the title of the movie, Bi Curious. Ryoga's ears perked up, and he saw Kintaro and Ranma looking at his secret video. Well, secret to Ranma anyways. His super secret video where 2 men and a woman have sex with each other. No limits on who they do it with either. The video Kintaro insisted he steal 2 years ago. The video he watched every time he came home. Ryoga's ears grew hot as he shouted, "Kintaro, why did you show him that?" Ranma looked over at Ryoga, right into his friend's eyes as if to confirm that it was really his video. The fear he saw there, and the redness of Ryoga's face and ears meant it was his. It also meant that it was something involving the hormone kami. Ranma read the title again to himself. Finally, he looked right at Ryoga and asked, "What is bi-curious?" Ryoga shivered at the curiosity that he saw in Ranma's eyes. Curiosity that he could kill cats, murder them by their 9 lives in one fell swoop. Curiosity that could lead to satisfaction. That thought brought Ryoga out of his stupor. He glanced at Kintaro, then turned fully to Ranma and said, It's about trying out some things. You want to watch it? Ranma looked at the cover, then looked at Kintaro, who was giving him a thumbs up. That was dangerous. Kintaro being happy about something meant it was perverted. But like the title of the movie in his hands, Ranma was feeling curious. He nodded. Ryoga took the video from him and set up a couple of beanbag chairs in front of the television in his room. Ryoga noticed the video was halfway in. He pressed it into the video cassette recorder and it immediately stopped it, then hit rewind. He turned around and noticed Ranma was looking at him. So he laughed and said, I forgot to rewind it last time I saw it. You watch it a lot? Silence except for the rewinding whine of the VCR. Suddenly, the machine clacked loudly, causing Ryoga to jump in fright. The video started to automatically eject, and he pushed it back in, and then stopped it again. He pressed the fast-forward button and counted to 3 before stopping again. Finally, Ryoga pressed play, and sat on the other beanbag chair opposite Ranma. The video came on, just as the title card faded. Scene. So, I like writing that. It's a bit of satire, essentially saying this guy watches this video a lot. He can stop that video on command on where it belongs. So, got the next scene going. Akane and Ukyo sat on Ukyo's bed while Shampoo was on a bedroll on the ground. Akane finished explaining everything up to that point, specifically Ranma's strange behavior with Ryoga the other night. Shampoo started pacing around. Every once in a while she'd look at her two rivals. At one point she stopped and asked, "You two together, yes?" Ukyo nodded and put her arm around Akane's shoulder. Akane leaned into Ukyo and said, "We're offering Ranma both of us at once." Shampoo nodded, but it seemed to be more to herself. At one point she stopped, stared at both girls for a long time before shivering and going back to pacing. Shampoo started holding out her hands like she was weighing something. Each time she would tilt her head towards a hand, it would dip down, and the other would go up. Akane looked at Ukyo, her face scrunched up, her eyes glistening emphatically. Ukyo, for her part, just squeezed Akane's shoulder and said, "Just let her think it out." Shampoo finally stopped and said, "Okay, we deal this later. Too much now." Ukyo conceded at that point. Shampoo then punched her fist and said, "Now we talk if Aiden is gay." We're gonna be hopping back to Ranma and Ryoga. Yeah, getting distracted. Alright. No problem. My throat is starting to get hoarse as well, so I think this will be my last chapter. Ranma was feeling hot. He was straining in his pants. The video continued showing things that Ranma never even thought about before. There were permutations of sex he just didn't comprehend. And it was pretty exciting. He wanted to take matters to hand, but Ryoga was there. Suddenly Kintaro stood up and looked at both boys. He smiled and said, "Now, I'm not sure how well I'm reading the room, but you guys do know that friends jack off in front of each other while watching porn, right?" Ranma shook his head, though it did explain something that Hiroshi had said to him before. Ryoga shook his head, because Ranma did. Kintaro smiled, and with a twinkle in his eye he said, "If it makes it easier, there's a really popular game you can play." Ranma got curious. "What game?" Kintaro smiled and asked, "Have you ever heard of Soggy Cracker?" Kids, don't play Soggy Cracker. Just don't. It's a terrible game. Next scene. Akane looked up and said, "I don't think he's gay. Not as a guy. Maybe his brain works differently as a girl." Shampoo thought for a moment. "But shampoo as cat's still shampoo." Ukyo nodded, a grimace on her face, and said, "What if he's always been interested in guys, but, society and his dad stopped him?" Suddenly from the ceiling, Kadachi dropped on Ukyo with a mallet. Ukyo collapsed on the floor, smashed by the mallet. Kadachi screeched, "My Lord Ranma is a paragon of manly virtue. He would never kiss another man. You harridans are lying." Oh, ho, 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 ho. Akane yelled, "Hey, watch it, you hurt Ukyo." Shampoo pulled out her maces. "You attack, I no hold back." The fight began. I need to drink a little bit more. Bold Kintaro statement. Yeah, that guy, man, he has no filter. Mm. Sweet, sweet Powerade. The fight was on. Ranma was racing to finish, but the threat of losing and the strangeness of the video made him just slightly too slow as Ryoga finished on the cracker. Ranma closed his eyes and swore. He stopped and put his stuff away. He could hear Kintaro. Sorry. He could hear Kintaro cheering for him to eat it. Ranma shook his head. "There's no way I'm doing this as a guy." He reached over to a glass of water they had brought up and splashed himself. He shrunk into Ryoga's old clothes, the shirt now clinging to her curves. Ranma picked up the cracker and put it in her mouth. She could see Ryoga's eyes go wide. From behind Ryoga, she saw Miko show up. Tears welled up in Ranma's eyes as she swallowed the cracker. Miko beamed a smile at her as she became blurry behind the tears that now poured down Ranma's cheeks without stopping. Ryoga shook his head. "You're a brave man, Ranma. Even though I see it pains you to follow through." Ranma nodded. Back to the girls. Kadachi stumbled away, limping, supported by Sasuke. The girls left back at Uchan's were half naked, their clothes cut by Kadachi's razor ribbon. Ukyo moved to close the door and saw a piece of paper on the floor. She picked it up and sighed. Showing the paper to Akane and Shampoo, Ukyo said, "Looks like your pet ninja stole the letter you gave to Shampoo." Akane swore. She looked over to Shampoo to thank her, when she noticed Shampoo's breast exposed from the cut it had received. Akane felt a heat rise to her face. She looked over at Ukyo guiltily. Ukyo shook her head, but she had a bit of a smile on her face. Ranma decided against sleeping at Ryoga's. She was afraid that she would take the taste she had in her mouth from the tap. It was so salty and tasty. She wondered if she was even a man with how tasty it was. Ryoga had felt so bad thinking that it was nasty that he wouldn't stop apologizing. To top it off, Ranma was in such a state that she forgot to switch back to being a boy. The night air was soothing. It was sloughing off the heat that she felt she was emanating in waves. Miko patted Ranma on her back and counseled, "It's okay. If it helps, he'd probably let you suck him off." Ranma tried to punch Miko, but the kami just bounced away laughing. Kane cuddled into Ukyo. Thoughts of a naked Shampoo and Ranma danced in her mind's eye. She joined the two of them with Ukyo, and suddenly Ukyo and Ranma were both boys and Akane was pressed up against Shampoo. Akane heard a noise and glanced up from cuddling with Ukyo. She saw a purple-haired woman with a lime green ninja outfit. Akane almost panicked when she couldn't even sense the ninja, even though she was looking right at her. Akane tensed and asked, "Who are you?" The woman smiled. "I'm Miko, your hormone kami. Sorry I'm late. I'm here to give you pubes." And that's the end of chapter 4. Time to barf. A brave soul, I suppose. Oh. Alright. Thank you so much for hanging out. And the start of pubes, yeah. Thank you so much for hanging out. I'm gonna be going. We're wrapping up. We only did the stream for 2 hours. I think after 2 hours of constant talking, my throat is starting to yell at me. So thanks again for hanging out. Thanks for everybody else who showed up over the time. I'm going to be posting this up on YouTube, so I'm going to change this to the scene of comment, like, and subscribe, and support me on Patreon for the YouTube channel. And I'll catch everybody later. Bye. Bye bye. Look, I got him to wave.